So Dan, we'd like to hear about the Iowa experience with evidence-based practice now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Very good. We're having problems here in Iowa. It's quite a bit warm, and our power's gone off twice now, just as I get ready to speak. I hope that's not a bad sign. So I wanted to talk about the integrated model of evidence-based policy and practice. This is a balanced and responsible use of research and best available data to guide policy and practice decisions to improve outcomes. A substantial body of research exists on coefficient practices that are proven to reduce risk, offender risk. We know what works and what does not work. However, knowledge of these evidence-based practices is not sufficient to implement and sustain this new way of doing business. Therefore, NIC and CJI and its partners developed the integrated model for implementation of EBP, which outlines the framework needed to guide this transformation that maintains a separate but integrated focus on three areas: the evidence-based principles, organizational development, and collaboration. Evidence-based, or EBP principles, are the 8 principles supported by research that together increase the likelihood of offender risk reduction. 1 is assess and actuarial risk needs. 2, the enhance intrinsic motivation. 3, target interventions based on principles of risk, needs, responsivity, dosage, and treatment. 4, skill train with directed practice, cognitive behavioral. 5, increase positive reinforcement. 6, engage in ongoing support in natural communities. 7, measure relevant processes and practices. And 8, provide measurable feedback. The next circle focuses on organizational development. Agencies must have the capacity to undergo a shift in their business practices and organizational culture in order to create and sustain an evidence-based organization. This includes rethinking mission, values, vision, and gaining new knowledge and skills and making the necessary infrastructure and policy changes. And lastly, the collaboration. Collaboration with system stakeholders enhances internal and external buy-in and creates more holistic change. Engaging stakeholders eliminates barriers and creates a shared vision that supports system change and efforts. What this then takes us to, and our experience that we've, and our perspective, at least here in our system, we felt like there was a certain need to move and focus on the leadership within the organization. And so you need all 3 of these, circles, and you need to focus on all 3 of these pieces of the integrated model to implement evidence-based practice throughout your system. None of these happen in a vacuum, and there needs to be a culture change which must be driven by leadership of the organization. This culture change, which is really a clear vision and expectations for moving forward, needs to be communicated throughout the organization. You need to increase transparency. You need to have a continued focus on leadership development for all leaders at all levels of the organization. We force the issue of making data-driven decisions, measured performance outcomes, and we work to strive to improve our results, and we're continuing to do that today. This change needs to be driven from the top by the leaders. So as in changing our culture, we wanted to start with, where do we begin? We begin with our leaders, and that focuses on leadership development. And what we did within our system is we spent a time away from the office in a leadership retreat, which encompassed all of the wardens throughout the institution, all of the district community corrections directors, and central office executives. And we focused discussions regarding on who we are, and as an agency, where do we want to go and how do we get there. The decision was made at that time to drive change through our organization with leaders modeling the way. We then developed a foundational leadership curriculum that all supervisors and managers completed, which really set the tone for our future organizational change efforts. As part of this leadership development, and one piece of it was that we developed performance plans that were reflective of evidence-based principles and practices. And we did that for wardens and other executive staff throughout the organization. And part of this plan was to select, develop, and lead cross-functional evidence-based practices core teams at each of their respective locations. So we've developed the leadership, and then we moved towards focusing on the system as a whole. This system, an integrated one, were led by core teams, and we had these core teams which were first modeled in our community corrections agencies throughout our state in 2004, and then institutions in our central office in 2006. And I must emphasize that this whole process is not a quick one. This change process, it takes time, and it was over a number of years to get us to where we are today. These EBP core teams are responsible for assessing their districts or institutions in the three areas, EBP, OD, and collaboration, to determine the needs and gaps. And we have a copy of the self-survey that we provided to each of these locations that's on the website. We then developed action plans. Each of the sites developed local action plans to address the identified gaps and needs. These EBP teams were then expanded to include subcommittees in all three areas of evidence-based principles, organizational development, and collaboration. Some of the things we started with were we identified the training that we needed statewide and specific to each of our facilities or each of our locations, institutions, or districts. And training such as motivational interviewing and the assist training that we provided. We also focused on the sustainability, meaning we wanted to plan for how we could sustain the efforts in this effort to integrate this EBP into our system. So we got training, and we didn't just get some training to come out to a few people. We did training for trainers on evidence-based practices, motivational interviewing, and assist. Another big element of an integrated system has to do with your reentry, and it's certainly part of this that was helpful for us. We have a system, and we developed a new case plan that begins really at pretrial and probation. It goes through prison and parole. That case plan is used across the entire system at the day the offender begins his time with us. And we have that collaboration built through systemically throughout our correction system in Iowa. We also hired reentry coordinators, in all of our institutions and all of our districts, so that we have folks zeroing in on how to best provide reentry services to the offenders that we serve. The last piece of this reentry case plan has to do with our what we refer to as ICON, our Iowa Communication Offender Network, and we have all of our systems that communicate together, not just our community corrections agencies, but our institutions and our other partner agencies that we work with. And we have a seamless system that provides a continuum of supervision and services as a result. So we've started with the leadership. We've developed the systems focus and integrating this EBP and reentry. We need to make sure we're providing good services, so we move into fidelity and feedback. Of course, as all work, this is all this is put into action, and ensuring everyone stays on track to make the changes is vital. Developing a learning organizational environment and continuous improvement mindset by making our results more visible is just one of the ways that we've done this. In fiscal year 2007 and 8, a statewide EBP assessment team was coordinated. We developed measures to assess programs for level of adherence to EBP, standards of practice. Our goals with this was specific. Our specific goals in regards to this were really around the areas of measure performance and results. We wanted to determine the baseline data, and then the programs were assessed and rated as the following: needing improvement, promising, or excellent. We then we had to help these programs improve, and the different institutions and districts, we had them provide for presentations at central office so that we could publicly take ownership and help them make changes that were needed in their programs. Then we provided feedback as part of that. It was a good discussion back and forth amongst the groups, and then experts in evidence-based practices that were around the room to assist them with that. So after the programs were assessed and for adherence to the EVP principles and programs that were not meeting the threshold for adherence to EVP, some of these programs were eliminated. And if they weren't doing it, and we knew we couldn't get to those programs to where we wanted them to be, we eliminated them, and then we moved on, and we focused on those promising and or those needing improvement. And we were expected to develop continuous quality improvement plans and programs to continue to measure that. So a few of the ways that we, in addition, a few of the ways that we communicate how we were doing with staff, public, and decision makers was really just to show the results and to show our transparency. So we provided with them and we provide them today with ongoing report on our performance measurement. We provide them with data downloads. That's a one-page brief that is sent out to all staff each month. And then we have a scorecard that is the results that we have throughout our programs, which are posted on our department intranet and our Iowa Results website. So we're continually trying to improve, and this effort and this work is reflected in our results. And I move to the results slide, and we talk about. So actually, we started assessing our programs in 2008. While we eliminated several programs right off the bat based on the assessments, as part of our third quarter in 2010, the percentage of programs scoring in the promising and excellent range has increased by 10%. And then in the area specifically of substance abuse programming, just wanted to highlight this one area. We have observed some significant changes in data. We believe due in part to the improved programs, we have observed a reduction in risk assessment scores for medium to high risk offenders in institutions with an identified substance abuse treatment, which dropped by 13%. Improvements are also reflected in overall the overall recidivism rate, which remains one of the lowest in the nation, currently at 35.5%. This is based on the percentage of offenders returning to prison. So what I've covered in the last few minutes are merely the highlights of what we have done in Iowa relative to EVP and to reentry. I think we're past the question point. The panel question point, and I believe we're going to move into the audience questions.
We will do that now, Dan. Thank you very much for providing the background of the Iowa experience. We've found that your experience in Iowa aligns directly with the discussion that Gary and Cindy were having while we were trying to get your audio fixed around both the fidelity and feedback to staff and training that is critical for them to develop these new skills with the new practices that are aligned with evidence-based principles, as well as the system integration with the collaboration of system stakeholders. Dan, can you talk a little bit before we get into the audience questions about your perspectives around aligning business practices in terms of budget? In the economy that we're facing right now, so many jurisdictions are facing budget cuts. Can you tell us a little bit how you use the measurement and tracking in terms of the results that you just discussed to make difficult funding decisions?
First of all, I want to tell you I'm not online anymore. I'm only on the call. Our power's gone off a few times, and it just keeps knocking us off. So I just wanted to let you know that. In regards to the question, budget certainly plays an impact in everything that we do, and I think now is the time where it's reflected in most of our agencies. But we've got to focus on the results. You start looking at the success that you can have with the offenders, and by implementing these principles and the reentry efforts, you're going to have an impact on the number of offenders that you supervise or that come into your institutions. So you focus your efforts and your resources into the things that work and making this more efficient. We all know that we've been asked to do more and more and do more with less. As we as we move forward with trying to improve and be more efficient in what we do, it behooves us to implement those things that will do that. And the implementation of the evidence-based practices or programs that are effective and will result, will work, and then get rid of those programs that do not, it's going to make us more efficient. So we've got less staff, less resources, but we also cut those programs out that are ineffective in our agencies. And that's a hard thing to do when we think we're doing a lot of good work in some programs, but the results are very little impact.
Thank you for that, Dan, and we'll certainly try and make do with having you on the phone. I'm glad that we can at least still hear you during your power outage.